Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, viewers, to another episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Texans your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and this episode of the Locked On Texans is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty and affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there, and I'm loving it. Cody Davis is my co-host joining today's show. We're going to have a fun episode joining the Locked On Dolphins. So a lot is going on with Houston and Miami in the last few months. So that's going to be up for today. But Cody, go ahead and give the folks a rundown for today's show. And as always, let's talk some Texans.
Yes, sir. And as you just mentioned, we're going to be joined by Locked On Dolphins as we discuss this mirror image between the Houston Texans and the Miami Dolphins as we kick off week 9. We're talking about two organizations. One organization, we are not surprised that they are sitting at 1-7 heading into this game, but the other organization, the one down in South Beach, we are very surprised because, you know, whether they had Deshaun Watson or Tua, at the end of the day, we thought for sure how the way they finished last season, we thought for sure they were going to be a primary contender in the AFC and just in general in the entire NFL this year. And boy, has everything went down the drain for them. But ladies and gentlemen, before we get over to that crossover edition, John, listeners, I got a tad bit of good news for you guys.
What you got?
Tyrod Taylor had an opportunity to see him in practice. Last week I saw him in practice. He wasn't doing much. He was just throwing the football, you know, looked like he was just warming up his shoulder. But on yesterday, had an opportunity to see him. Not only was he just warming up his shoulders, he was going through his steps. He was going through his practices. He was going through his reads. And I'm happy to say he was getting first team reps.
That's good.
So that's good. David Culley has not came out and said whether or not Tyrod Taylor will be the starting quarterback for Sunday. I'm pretty sure later on today when he speaks around 11, 12 o'clock today, he will make that announcement. But I am expecting Tyrod Taylor to play. Nobody is telling me this. This is not according to no sources. This is coming from me, from what I seen on yesterday at practice, because like I mentioned, Tyrod was moving really well. As a matter of fact, you guys can go to my Twitter account just to see how well he was moving around. Not only that, when the Texans started going through their practices, when they started going through plays on what they're going to run, Tyrod Taylor was taking first team reps. And last week, when he first came off of IR, that was not the case. He was out there. He kind of looked like the Tyrod that I saw throughout training camp and throughout those first 6 quarters. So all you fans who are just, John, like you as a reporter, all you reporter and fans who are out there just hoping and wishing that the Texans just give you one more win, this could be the game.
And it should be. Right, it's set up perfectly. 1-17. It's 1-17 that you're playing in Miami. I know it's a little tongue twister, but you know they got their issues of their own. Right, that defense has regressed heavily from what we saw last year. They are allowing 291 passing yards per game. So whether it's Tyrod or Davis Mills, you know, I think this is a winnable game for Davis Mills if he's going to be the starter out there. I think definitely for Tyrod Taylor, but push that ball downfield, regardless of who's at quarterback. The conservativeness needs to be kicked out the window, shown the street, kick it out. I don't know, whatever, but they do not need to be conservative against this team. The ball needs to be in the air. The ball needs to be in the hands of the receivers. I think Houston should come out in a 4-receiver set majority of this game in order to attack this defense. I think that's the only way Houston has a good chance of winning, if they air it out some more. So I'm glad that Tyrod Taylor is back.
Well. I'm sorry to cut you off. Let's not air it out too much because Xavier Howard is still on the opposite side of that line of scrimmage. I just want to throw that in there.
Listen, man. 291 yards per game is what they're allowing in the passing game so far this year. And we've seen that Houston's offense moves when they're passing the ball. We've seen that Houston's offense is at a stalemate, stagnant, non-existent when they're trying to force these runs. This is game 9. It's not happening. It's not working. And so go get that win, man. I think this is the game for them to win going into a bye week. Give them a big sigh of relief and can come back for that next game. But Tyrod or Davis Mills, this is a prime example and opportunity for them to go out there and air it out. Tim Kelly, where are you? As mentioned before, this episode is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get that tasty and affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to connect. It's a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they will have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. I think you guys should go to McDonald's right now. They got a 20-piece nugget for $8, and it comes with a basket of fries. I got my niece and nephews that the other day, and I didn't have to worry about them bothering me at all because they were doing their thing, right? Eating good McDonald's. And on top of that, with that great Wi-Fi, you can go and catch a game up there if you want to. Did somebody say a Locked On watch party? Who knows? Locked On Texas watch party. As always, bop. I'm loving it. And while you're driving to McDonald's, if you need to get some gas, make sure you download Get Upside before you head to the gas station. You're able to make up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas. Every time you fill up, just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use promo code Touchdown for NFL, baseball for MLB, or hockey for NHL.
We are back for another crossover Thursday episode here on the Locked On Network. Locked On Dolphins, Locked On Texans, Kyle, Cody, John. We are going to have a good time talking about a game everybody was probably pretty interested in the build-up to the trade deadline, and I don't know if anybody's going to have any interest in it now outside of these two fan bases in Houston and Miami because everybody obviously had eyes on the Deshaun Watson standoff and saga that's been going on for real long time. But that, going to put it on the back burner. We got a football game to talk about. So, gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing well, man. As you already alluded to, I'm not going to lie. I thought when we be doing this crossover, you'd be asking me stuff about, how good is Deshaun Watson on the field? But look, we doing good, man. As you know, the Houston Texans are just as dysfunctional to a certain extent as the Miami Dolphins. And this is going to be a very interesting game. And if you don't mind, let's just jump right into it, Kyle. And
cool.
I would like to ask you straight up, what is the deal with Tua? I'm a Tua fan. I have a lot of confidence that he's going to turn into a very solid quarterback in this league. It seems like it's split down the middle. What can you say about my guy Tua?
It's really odd when you think about the timeline, right? And that they drafted him at number 5 overall. And the offensive coordinator was there last year as the guy who had coached for 6 years with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was the returning starter on the team. And everybody kind of thought, okay, maybe 2020 redshirt year for Tua, had the hip injury, all the COVID stuff that went on, just let him get back to 100%. And you get to week 7 and all of a sudden in the bye week drops and they make the decision to put Tua in when Brian Flores had said no less than 3 weeks earlier, if Tua was my son, I wouldn't play him because he's not ready. And then they put him in. And it's they build it as part of what's best for the team in the evaluation process. But then at the same time, in the fourth quarter of a couple of games last year, when Miami's down, Brian Flores goes back to the bullpen and puts Ryan Fitzpatrick in. So this whole process has been very unorthodox, and I think it's created a lot of problems that didn't necessarily have to exist. And it's probably instilled some doubt with some of the players on the team who were looking there last year and saying, man, we're trying to run for the playoffs, and we get in trouble, and the starting quarterback's not even our guy. We're going to go back to the other guy. And I think that's probably kind of raised some eyebrows and created some questions. And Kyle Van Noy was a player who was on the team last year who they cut loose in the offseason. And that was perceived to be part of that decision-making process. It was not just Cap, but Kyle was an outspoken leader on the team and on the defense. And when he left Miami, he didn't necessarily have nice things to say about Tua. So I think some of this strife was created last year. And then when a football player of Deshaun Watson's caliber becomes available because he's displeased with Houston, well, Miami couldn't help themselves. And Stephen Ross has had 2 goals since he bought the Dolphins in the late 2000s. And it was win a Super Bowl, find the heir to Dan Marino. Well, step 2 there, finding the heir to Dan Marino, helps you get perceivably closer to step 1. And it really feels like he had gotten permission to speak with Watson ahead of the trade deadline. And I don't know how they can look anybody in a straight face and say, we still believe in Tua. And I'm with you. I think Tua can be a successful NFL quarterback, but I think it's probably going to have to be somewhere other than Miami, just based on what this first year and a half has been like for him.
You know, you mentioned the locker room. I want to look at Brian Flores. How much disappointing has he been this year for the Miami Dolphins as a head coach? How good has he been eluding those Deshaun Watson questions? I think that they have been hitting him constantly. Every week it seems like he's getting in the media for a Deshaun Watson question in his response. So how much of the locker room does he still have? And will he be with the team next year moving forward?
Yeah, so that last part there is the really interesting part of all of this, because it feels like the Watson saga is to be continued, right? And you'll revisit this in the offseason. And if I'm Stephen Ross and I do want this to happen, am I going to fire the guys in-house who I know were ready to make that happen and then try to hire new guys and sell them on a quarterback I don't have on my roster yet? Like, that's pretty complicated to do. So I think the fact that this pursuit led to no action happening probably helps the case of both Brian Flores and Chris Grier coming back to the team next year. But Brian Flores specifically, he's getting peppered with these questions because he gives the same exact answer every time he's asked, which is Tua is our quarterback. Period. There's no further extrapolation. There's no further. It's just Tua is our quarterback. I'll leave it at that. And when that's all you get, when these rumors just don't go away, everybody's going to be like, that's it. Like, is he your quarterback right now? Is he your quarterback long term? Do you like what you see? So then they brought out the general manager, Chris Grier, yesterday to have his first press conference availability in quite some time to kind of try to address some of those issues. But I'm a little worried about the way the team is playing from an energy perspective. Brian Flores, his mantras have been do the things that take no talent, play your butt off, play smart, play disciplined. And the team's not doing any of those things right now. They're not playing inspired. The defense has regressed to an insane degree. And you watch, they have this merry-go-round of assistant coaches where coaches are coming in, they're leaving for the same job somewhere else without taking a promotion. He's on his 3rd and 4th offensive coordinators in 3 years. He's on his 4th offensive line coach in 3 years. And it's like, I don't know how you fix that, because guys outside the league, or outside the team across the league, they see this stuff happening. And it's like, I'm not going to tie my profession to come down and be your 5th offensive line coach in 4 years just for us to get to the end of the year. And you can't hire a competent OC and I'm going to be out on my butt and out of a job. So that's the worry for me with Flores. And he's been a massive letdown because he was so good for those first 2 years.
And Kyle, going into week 9, the Miami Dolphins has the same record as the Houston Texans. Going into the season, everyone knew the Texans were going to be a dumpster fire. But Deshaun Watson or not, we all believed that Miami was going to be a contender in the AFC. Can you just speak on how disappointing of a season this has been and what has went on that led you guys to having the same record as the Texans so far?
It's the most disappointing season I can remember in quite some time. And it's kind of this perpetual cycle where they hire a coach, there's a successful season somewhere in there, and then the team immediately regresses back. And it doesn't matter what they do from a hierarchy perspective. It doesn't matter what they do from what kind of coach they go after. This organization it really seems like they have a hard time keeping everybody on the same page and rowing in the same direction. And a lot of their issues are self-inflicted issues. And I think that's the most frustrating part of all of it, because I can't help but wonder, if Deshaun Watson had the Dolphins on one of the teams that was on his no trade destination list, and he was never an option for Miami, I can't help but wonder what this offseason would have looked like and building up to the season. And it felt like there were times where they were holding out hope that they could get this done and maybe putting that potential ahead of some of the other needs on the team. And, as I said, with the players and the questions that existed going back to Fitz on the roster and thinking about some of those guys who, if there's kind of a rift with Fitz guys versus Tua guys on the roster, and if Tua gets hurt week 2, right? And just the whole thing's perpetuating. And it's like, man, we knew it. Like, I feel like there's a lot of negativity in this black cloud of them having eyes for somebody who's not on their roster has really probably helped brew this toxic environment that the team is in right now that they just can't seem to shake or get out of. But yeah, man, I mean, expectations were so high. They overachieved in each of the first 2 years Brian Flores was here. And this is about as nightmarish of a scenario as I can remember going back to like 2007 when they went 1-15.
Wow. So, but is there any hope for Brian Flores? I mean, like you mentioned, he had 2 good seasons, 10-6 last year with the quarterback rotation, and now they're just tailed off completely. But is there hope for him to get it one more year with this team?
I think they'll need to bounce back down the stretch with the wins and losses and not continue the tailspin that they're in. And he's going to have a really strong answer for what are you going to do on the offensive side of the ball. He brought in Chad O'Shea as his offensive coordinator in 2019, his first year, who was in New England, and he was fired at the end of the year. They said the playbook was too complex. He was too rigid with trying to teach the guys the playbook. There were players that had complaints about him. He's out. Well, then they bring in Shane Gailey and they tailor it to specifically Ryan Fitzpatrick. And less than halfway through the season, they pull Fitzpatrick despite the fact that he was playing relatively well. And the chemistry never exists. And Tua himself said in the offseason, I didn't really know the playbook all that well last year. Didn't have any freedom at the line of scrimmage to change plays. I knew plays were dead, but we had to run them because I didn't have anything at my disposal. So then Shane Gailey's out at the end of last year. And their hiring process was a bunch of dead ends until they co-promoted 2 guys to serve as co-offensive coordinators that were on the staff as assistant coaches last year. Like, this is not sustainable. So they got to start winning some games. And then Brian Flores has got to say, hey, here's an established coach that exists in the league that has proven time and time again that he could run an efficient, effective NFL offense. I'm going to hire him. I'm going to let him run that side of the ball, let him work with our quarterback, and I'm not going to touch it and stay out of the way. And if he can do that, I think there is a chance that he can find himself back on the sidelines again in 2022.
That was the Miami Dolphins. Now let's talk to Houston Texans when we come back. That's going to be fun, of course. Thank you for checking out the Locked On Texans and the Locked On Dolphins. We got more on the way. We're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all of the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, just using promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports because BetOnline is where the game starts.
We are back here on a crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Dolphins, Locked On Texans. I want to get both you guys' opinions on everything. This is nice. I usually just do the one-on-ones. So the fact I get 2 of you guys, I want to hear your back and forths on everything that we've talked about. So obviously the head coaching search for the Texans this past offseason was cast into the spotlight when some of those decisions were made, and that was part of the process, along with the hiring of Nick Caserio, that helped alienate your franchise quarterback who's not playing this year and has requested a trade. But what I'm most interested in is David Culley's been a really long, tenured, well-accomplished, well-respected assistant coach in the NFL for a really long time. How has his tenure in year one as a head coach the culmination of his entire career, how has that gone for him thus far this season?
To be honest with you, it's kind of hard to judge him as a head coach. Some people are a little bit harsher on that and say it has gone terrible, especially when you consider the fact that this team is 1-7. He's been taking a lot of heat for it, but at the same time, he isn't the main one making all the plays. I mean, making all the calls. It's Lovie Smith making calls. It's Tim Kelly making calls. In the press box, it's Nick Caserio, the general manager. He has a say so in every single thing that David Culley is quote unquote putting out there on the field. And, it's a little bit unfortunate that he became the guy that's taking all the darts for all of the mishaps the Houston Texans have been through this year in terms of coaching. But it's hard to say because, like I keep saying, he isn't the final decision like you guys have there in Miami.
Yeah, I think so far it's been, pretty disappointing, but for the most part, it's been disappointing in the way that we expected it for Houston to go. Now, there was a couple of games where we could have won. Cleveland is one of those games. I thought the Carolina Panther was a very winnable game. The New England Patriots was also a game that they should have won and held the lead in for majority of the game, but he's never been a coordinator before. And so that comes with its own issues when you skip from being an assistant coach to a head coach. And those growing pains have been there. That's mainly why I think that they assembled the coaching staff that they did around him. A lot of veteran presence with guys with a lot of years in the NFL. But overall, when I look at Culley and the experience so far, 1-7 is 1-7. And you're not going to get too many good things out of being 1-7. We're not judging him for what's going on with Deshaun Watson or that situation. We're only judging him on week 1 through up until this Sunday when they take on the Miami Dolphins, and they have been pretty bad on both sides of the ball.
Now, how about as I'm looking at Houston and some of the familiar names, and most specifically Laramie Tunsil, who was the centerpiece of a big trade from back in 2019 and got himself a nice contract, and he's been on IR. I believe he's eligible to return. So what's the vibe in Houston? Like, is this a Laramie Tunsil revenge game opportunity here, or are we not going to get a chance to see him in week 9 already? Jeez.
Yeah, you're not going to get an opportunity to see Laramie Tunsil, unfortunately. He's still listed on IR. I mean, he is designated to return, but he's still, quote unquote, recovering from his hand surgery that he underwent. He sustained a hand surgery in the game against the New England Patriots. And, David Culley even said on Monday that he doesn't really know how the recovery is going. But at the end of the day, I just think because this team is 1-7, I don't expect them to win another game. He's probably thinking the same. I would not be surprised if we do not see Laramie Tunsil anymore, but you don't have to worry about Laramie Tunsil on Sunday.
So Brian Flores, historically with the Dolphins, maybe not this year, but historically, has looked pretty – his defenses have looked pretty good against opposing rookie quarterbacks. And obviously Tyrod Taylor – hamstring injuries, missed some time. Davis Mills has had some bright flashes. There's been some low lows, and the team output for points for, I think, 3 of his 6 starts is like 17 combined points over 3 of his starts combined. So there's been ups and downs, but I'm just curious, what is it about Davis Mills that has flashed the most? What has been his biggest Achilles heel? And if Miami were to try to push his buttons and get him rattled, what would be the most direct way for them to do that on Sunday?
So I'm going to try to answer those in order, the way you asked them, right? The first one would be, what are the good things we've seen from Davis Mills? 2 things for me has been the growth in going through progressions. And whenever they give him the opportunity to throw the ball downfield, he has a pretty good arm, and he's able to kind of get the ball in the vicinity of that receiver. He's made some plays. He's missed some plays. That comes with being a rookie. But the bad version of Davis Mills we've seen has been to Houston not allowing him to push the ball down the field. The second question was some of his Achilles heel so far.
Yeah.
The top 5, the offensive line. The front 5 has not done a good job. Brandon Staley, the head coach for the L.A. Chargers. I always still call them the San Diego Chargers.
Good save.
The Chargers, he mentioned why the run game is important, that it brings a certain physicality to the game, to the offense. Well, Houston has completely not been able to tap into that. So that physicality for Houston hasn't been there, and it shows. They've been pushed around. They've been knocked off the field. They haven't been able to sustain drives. The front five, from tackle to tackle, whether it had been Laramie Tunsil and the offensive line without Laramie Tunsil, have looked even worse. But without them being able to create a run game or block for him and give him more time, then it shows in Davis Mills maybe throwing an early read pass or an errant throw or just not going through his reads. And one thing that I think the Miami Dolphins could do on Sunday to kind of throw him off is just throw some blitzes at him. Mix it up, if I'm being honest. Get in his face. Whenever you play with these young quarterbacks, when they come to the league, when they're still trying to figure out coverages and different looks. So throw everything you can at them. And the Miami Dolphins hasn't been a good defense this year. So the more you can kind of get in his face, the more opportunities the Dolphins will have at getting some turnovers.
What's interesting about that is they played a pretty inspired first half against Buffalo last week, and we got to the end of the game, and Xavier Howard came out and said, yeah, this was the first time we really called a defensive game plan like we did all last year, to which you're kind of like, oh, okay, like you were sixth in scoring defense last year. Why'd you change everything up? So they did bring a lot of blitzes. They did get after Josh Allen. I think they're fifth or sixth in blitz rate to this point this season. So would expect to see a blitz-heavy approach to try and get in Davis Mills' head a little bit. I want to ask you guys about the defense for Houston. Obviously, J.J. Watt departure after a very successful run with the franchise, and then a trade of Charles Omenihu just in front of the trade deadline yesterday or earlier this week. So who are some of the defensive standouts? And I hear you talk about the issues that the Houston offense has, and boy, it sounds pretty familiar because a lot of the same things and a lack of ability to create push up front. It's all the same stuff Miami's dealing with right now. So if they were to try to formulate a game plan to beat Houston on defense, who are the guys they have to be most mindful of? And who are some guys that they might want to physically try to challenge in the box?
John Grenard, Cody, I think, right now, the second-year defensive lineman out of Florida. And you're in the Miami area, so I'm sure Miami and Florida, you've seen him a couple of times maybe play out there. But John Grenard, in 6 weeks, he's been able to account for 7 sacks. He has a great motor. Every week we're seeing different moves from him. He hit somebody with a spin last week, and I was like, hold on real quick. That's why we were able to move on from Shaq Lawson. Y'all didn't tell us about Shaq Lawson, man.
You were going to give us something for him, so you didn't tell me about Bernard McKinney. So what gives?
Okay, so we're even. We're even. We
did each other dirty, yeah.
Yeah, but I look at your offensive line right now. I'm sure there's not a lot of confidence in that unit, and John Grenard has been playing really well. Also, I think this is a game for Malik Collins to have a statement game as well. He's been playing well as of late. He's getting in the groove, getting more comfortable, and I think the defensive line is the best unit for this defensive side of the ball. And they're just getting their own personal groove, regardless of what's going on in our secondary and at the linebacker level. So those are the two guys with Grenard and Collins that I think could really disrupt this game on Sunday.
Cody, any names in the secondary, guys that are playing well, guys that, if we were going to throw some volume in targets at somebody, you might be sitting there shaking your. I could tell you if you see Justin Coleman 27 on the field, your eyes better light up like Christmas trees, because there's some good yards to be had if you see 27 in coverage for Miami. I'll give you the tip right now.
Outside of Justin Reed, hell no. At one time, I would love to sit here and tell you Lonnie Johnson, but ever since he got benched going into that game against the Indianapolis Colts. It's almost like he gave up. It's like we saw the best version of Lonnie Johnson, and in the blink of an eye, we've been stuck in this worst version of Lonnie Johnson. And his coverage last week was just god awful. I mean, if Tua can attack him, then you guys might win by like 3-4 touchdowns at that point, because he has been terrible. The only person that's worth talking about just a little bit in this secondary is like I just mentioned, Reed, and Reed can't do it by himself. The cornerbacks are terrible. They just cut Vernon Hargreaves, and John, you might disagree with me, but he's been somewhat decent this year, and that's not saying a lot because he's been just as bad since he got here. So no, put it like this, as John just alluded to, and this is how I feel. Not only is that defensive line the best version of the Texans defense, but it might be the only solid unit that the Texans have. And I know you guys down there in Miami have a lot of issues going on with your offensive line. So that's the only way I can see the Texans kind of staying competitive in this game, is if they draw a good enough defensive scheme by using their defensive front. But that secondary, no, not a chance.
This will be a compelling game, regardless of what the records say. Feels like a couple of evenly matched teams. I think it's a couple of evenly matched teams with their own respective issues.
Right. And I think this is this team. They're the man in the mirror. You see the Dolphins, you see the Texans, and I think that's fair. Quarterback issues, front office issues, head coach issues, record playing on the field issues, defensive issues, can't run the ball issues.
They're both tied into Deshaun Watson in some kind of way.
It's the Spider-Man pointing meme.
It's exactly.
The Texans and Dolphins right now. But if you're listening to this crossover Thursday, odds are you guys are probably pretty interested in the game. And we thank you for tuning in with Locked On Dolphins, Locked On Texans, your team every day. We don't just say it here. We live it on the Locked On Network, and we appreciate everybody who makes us your first listen throughout the course of the day. Enjoy the game this weekend. Enjoy the college football that's to be had this weekend as well. And thanks, as always, for listening to the Locked On Network.